Hello there, it's Antrice, and welcome to another episode of the Savvy Painter Podcast. The Savvy Painter Podcast is published every week on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio, and SoundCloud. If you are a painter or artist who is looking for down-to-earth, real-life conversations about art, how to create it, how to sell it, you are in the right place. Savvy Painter has been downloaded over 1 million times by artists in 150 countries. This is the place where you will find your community, you will be inspired to create, and you'll hear real stories from artists who are thriving with their art. So if you are new to this podcast, I want to welcome you to the Savvy Painter community. But make sure you don't miss an episode. Sign up for weekly updates, free guides, and workshop announcements. Go to savvypainter.com and click on join. It's that easy. Trekell Art Supplies is sponsoring this episode. Trekell offers sensibly priced art supplies conveniently shipped to your door. For over 30 years, Trekell has been obsessed with the art of brush making. They have been testing and tweaking their brushes to get the perfect balance, flow, and snap. And from now until July 20th, when you use promo code SAVVYGIFT, you get a free number 6 round golden Taklon brush to try out. So head over to Trekell.com, that's Trekell.com, and use the promo code SAVVYGIFT at checkout, and Trekell's gonna toss in that free paintbrush for you along with your order. John Wentz is a contemporary painter currently focusing on portraiture. His interest in art began at the age of 6 when he first discovered Batman and Spider-Man comic books. John later learned through a friend that there is such a thing as a degree in fine arts, so he went on to get his from the San Francisco Academy of Art. In this episode, we discuss his artwork, his process, and we get into a conversation about social media and its impacts. Everything from loss of culture, what it's doing with regards to our active or inactive states of mind. And if you're not really sure what I'm referring to, don't worry. John does a great job of explaining what that means. This eventually leads into a discussion about appropriation versus influence, which does include a lot of musical reference because somehow that's the only description that seemed to fit. We also talk about the act of painting and our need as artists to dive deep, to focus and spend large amounts of time just sitting and staring at the work, even when that feels like a waste of time. We wonder about the concept of the hive mind versus individual minds, if social media has brought us into a new phase of art. I don't know if we come to a solid conclusion on any of this, but I do believe that these conversations need to happen. As much as we want to pretend or just believe otherwise, our environment and the time we live in does shape our views and therefore our art. After you listen to this episode, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment in the show notes for this episode. Without further ado, here is John Wentz. John, thank you so much for being on the Savvy Painter Podcast. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Thank you. I'm very, very excited. Big fan.
Can you tell me a little bit about your background, your history, how you started painting and when you decided to become an artist?
Yeah, I got into art like I think all of us, like as a kid, but mine started with comic books. I think my first comic book was a Spider-Man and then Batman. And I was so just entrenched in that stuff. I would just copy each panel as accurate as I could. And then I think I moved on from that to like Dungeons and Dragons or something. I would just get any books. That is so dorky. Just any books I can that had like illustrations of things I was into, like dragons and monsters. And would just copy those. So I guess, kind of fell into doing master copies accidentally. But it was the comics, I think, that had the biggest impact.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, and it's great now that, it's in the last, how has it been, like 12 years or something, that comic book movies have come into play. Like my whole life was just entrenched in comic books.
How did you go from comic books and I also went through a dragon stage. It's so funny. And that's why I laughed when you were saying that. I'm like, oh God, I forgot about that. Those horrible drawings I did. But how did you get from comic books and dragons to master copies? Did somebody give you a book or what happened?
No, I mean, what I meant is like I inadvertently, those were doing master copies. When I later, went to art school, that's what you did. You did master copies. So I was copying, like Frank Miller was my favorite Batman artist. So, I mean,
Yeah.
the things that I learned by accident from Frank Miller, like value patterns and composition and anatomy and that stuff, it was invaluable. And it was luckily, for most of us, that's how we start. I enjoyed doing it. So it's like loving your homework.
Yeah.
So when I finally went to art school later on, it was a little bit of a disappointment. I'm like, oh man, I've already been doing this. Now I'm paying a lot of money to do it. But it was painting. So
where did you go to school?
I went to the Academy of Art in San Francisco.
Oh, good school.
And obviously there's a lot of, the time I was there, I graduated in 2006. I took a while. I started in like 2001, was a really great period to be there because the amount of painters that are still working today were classmates. Like went to school with Brett Amory, Kim Kogan, David Chung Lee, Kevin Moore, just all these Adam Forfang, like so many fantastic artists that came out of that 6 years that I was there. It was really amazing. But it's funny, like how I got into art school, like I was just doing comic books, for most of my life. And so naturally, I thought I would be a comic book artist or go into illustration. I sidelined for a bit, and I wanted to get into movie makeup because I'm a big horror fan.
Uh-huh.
But it's funny because I never thought about a school for fine art painting. Like that just wasn't part of my world. Like I'd seen Rembrandts and things like that, but it just seemed so inaccessible and kind of antiquated. I didn't even really realize that stuff still continued. I was really sheltered in this bubble of illustration. And so much so that I didn't even really understand art schools. Like I almost thought they were a thing of the past. Like I went to a junior college. That's how you study art. They had a couple art courses, and then you have to sit through all these other classes, humanities and all that. Yeah, I'm not very smart. I'm admitted about that. But a friend of mine, one of my best friends at the time, he enrolled at the academy. And he was a really good artist from the get-go. And then I saw in just a few months how much he progressed. And I was like, dude, this is amazing. Like, you got to tell me about this thing called art school. And so he let me come with him for a day. And all his teachers were cool with it. So I sat in all his classes. And my mind was blown. And what an amazing thing, right? I'm like, wait, what are your classes? And he's like, well, painting, drawing. Like, no humanities? No, it's just studying art? And he's like, yeah, that's all we do. I mean, I have to take a couple of general ed. And I was like, oh, I'm in. I'm so sold. That sounded like a dream. That's all you have to do is art. But I went in as illustration, right? Because I didn't consider fine art at all. And immediately was crushed because this idea of deadlines and not being able to do exactly what you want. And I was like, oh, great. It's over then. I don't want to do illustration. It just...
A true artist. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. I'm painting what I want to paint.
Yeah, and then it's funny because now how many years later, I'm like, wow, fine art's the same way. I mean, it's not that stringent. They don't tell you exactly what to paint, but there's deadlines and you don't do only what you want. You have to bend here and there for the most part. I mean, some people luck out, but you make you choose your battles, you bend in certain ways, but it's definitely a lot less militant, for lack of a better term, than illustration. And I took one fine art class as like a still life painting class. And then immediately my world changed. And then illustration was right behind me. And I just kind of dove head first into fine art. And I didn't even realize, like, I was so sheltered. I didn't realize it was still something that continued. I I understood there were painters like Jackson Pollock and this and that, but I thought it was a very small pond.
Uh-huh.
And once I got into it, my gosh, this is just huge. And then luckily around that time, there's art's become, and with social media, far more accessible. And I think more people are educated, more people understand it. So it was a really nice time, I think, like serendipitous to get involved in it.
Yeah, we live in such an amazing time right now to be able to do this. Like I still, every now and again, I'm like, as much as I kind of complain about social media and what a time sucker it is and how sometimes it can be super, super depressing. Now I'm just like, there's other parts where I'm like, oh my God, this is just still like, you can see people's work on the other side of the world in seconds. Like, it's crazy. You can talk to people, you have instant access to any artist in the world. You just have to say hi. That's amazing. It's a miracle.
Right? Yeah, it's unprecedented. Podcast. I mean, you just the information at your fingertips is limitless.
Yeah.
But I agree, like you said, and I think a conversation that doesn't happen enough is the negative sides of it. Because I agree, it's a tightrope that we walk with social media, and I think there's a lot of negatives and there's an astounding amount of positives. But it's interesting to me that it's become this thing. I feel like in quiet, when it's one-on-one with artists, all anyone does is complain about it. But in the open, you have to be like, oh no, it's totally amazing, and all it is good.
Really? Because I complain about it. I'll publicly complain about it. It's a time
do you
sucker.
openly? I've never heard you on.
Oh, you've never heard me complain about it?
No, and that's funny because I even re-listened to some podcasts or some of your older episodes just to get reacquainted, and I was like, wow, I almost felt bad. I'm like, wow, she's so positive. I hope I don't bring a negative vibe.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. I have to think about that. But this can be the negative one, John. It's okay. Like, there's balance in everything.
Well, I just heard, I was listening to Intelligence Squared recently, and they actually had a debate about social media and art, but in the arena of blue chip galleries. So for me, it's way out of my league. But it was an interesting take. It's the first I'd ever heard of a debate. People talk about its effect on social media. Is it good? Is it bad? It was fascinating.
Interesting. So let's talk about that. I'm curious because I think like the good obviously is that you can show your work, you can talk about your work, you can see other people's work instantly, and you can develop friendships with other artists almost instantly in a way that I don't think was ever possible before. But I think like for me, the downside is also that exact thing is that I feel like two things that we're losing individual culture more than we already were. I think, in some regards we were losing that a little bit through, movies and in some ways music, but not so much. But it feels like now, whereas, I don't know, maybe somebody was an artist in Nebraska was hard at work developing something and would have the time to really focus on that and really develop it and have to rely on herself in order to do that for an extended period of time, might get somewhere on their own that they never would get by showing it to other people. So now what happens is, maybe you have this person in Nebraska who's working on something and they post it on social media, and then an artist in Brazil sees it and they respond, or, they allow that to influence them and they take a piece of that and put that into their work. It's kind of like, in some ways really exciting, in the same way that maybe rap music was really exciting in the sense that you get to sampling and using other people's music was super exciting. And it really changed, I think, music. But with art, it's kind of, you get that exciting part of it. But then I think also the sad part of it is that you don't have that ability for a culture to really develop without it being influenced by another culture, or for it to be more pure.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I totally agree with that 100%.
And then the other part of it that I think just sucks is that I think we've lost our ability to just be without picking up the phone and looking at it. I think artists, painters, writers, musicians, anyone needs time to just observe life and think and allow things to percolate. And we don't give ourselves that time anymore. Like if you were even just sitting on a subway, for example, or on a long drive for a day or something, you would have to basically just sit there and entertain yourself, which allows you to connect dots and to follow thoughts and to, I don't know, to come up with ideas that need that gestation time. And I think now people, if you're standing in line at the grocery store, people can't even handle that. Like speaking for myself, I'll almost immediately grab my phone and go like, okay, what's happening here?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. Yeah. And those are the times there's that really popular story about like Einstein. He said his favorite idea times were when he was shaving or showering.
Uh-huh.
And, it's shown like it's those moments when we give our brain a break that like you said, it's gestation. Ideas are gestating and they're coming to form. And when you're constantly activating your brain with this device, you don't get that time. There was a book called What the Internet's Doing to Our Brain or something like that. I read it was like 10 years ago or something like that. And I forget the author off the top of my head, but was talking about that. Like he talked about, I forget what he called it, but there's two states of the brain. And to paraphrase, it's the active and non-active. And he said, if you look in history where there's great artistic movements, being in music, painting, whatever, it's at those times when people have time to relax. You look at Da Vinci, things like that. But now he said the active state is more like something like primal man, when art didn't flourish. You're too busy, your brain's busy trying to get food, going to war, or worrying about a tiger over in the bushes, things like that. And that's exactly what constantly going on that device does, is it just keeps your brain going without any downtime.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. It's kind of scary that book is 10 years old.
Yeah, right. I remember reading it. Like, it was like the boon of the internet. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then 10 years went by. I'm like, wow, I never finished that book. What happened? I got sidetracked. But,
I know, it's insane. Like, I feel like I notice it sometimes now too. Like, I would have no problem sitting, I wouldn't even think about sitting down and reading, a magazine article. Like I would just do it. Right. And the other day I was looking at this magazine and, it was like a detailed investigative article in a magazine. And I got like 3 paragraphs into it and found myself going, oh man, am I going to sit here and read this whole thing? And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Really? A magazine article.
Much.
I'm actually like getting to the point now where can't I just have bullet points? Like, can't you just get to the point?
Right. And the thing that's fascinating is in terms, I think, of painting as painters, that is the complete opposite of what the act of painting is. I mean, everybody has their different processes. But I remember going through the period, I think we all go through, where you're so fascinated with process. So you're always reading about other artists and how they painted, what their studio practices were. And the one that always stuck with me the most was Rothko. And I'm sure it's, romanticized a bit, but how, it was said that he would make a couple marks and then just sit and look at his painting for like 45 minutes.
Uh-huh.
And I read that at maybe 2007. So that time I'm like, really? Like I maybe 10 minutes? I can't do 45 minutes. Like I need to check Facebook or so, and it's just so against of what we do as painters. It's, I think that process of painting that people don't understand, that how it's, maybe at the beginning stage, you get into it really fast. But I've found with myself and a lot of other painters, like, you start at first with painting more and standing back less. And then as your painting develops, it reverses and you're looking at it more, trying to figure out what's the next stroke, what do I need to adjust? You go and take a mark, and then you have to sit there for a while. And painting is a slow process. So yeah, I agree. It's like that thing I try to just not, I'll do, like I tried for a while this thing called the Pomodoro method. Have you heard of that? Where you set a timer? Yeah. It worked great. It's like I'll do 30-minute chunks, and I had to like kind of just get my brain out of that funk to where it's like, luckily now I can just set it aside and not worry about it. But then at the same time, I was talking with a friend about this recently too, and it's like maybe that's the thing that's going to change art for us. Like going back to what you were saying, this is what I was thinking when you're talking about the culture. I was complaining with a friend about that because we were talking about like painting is vocabulary. Mm-hmm. So if there's appropriation and influence, but if you cross that line yourself or somebody else does, and you're like what somebody's doing and you start doing that, what is the meaning in it? It's like if somebody had a certain set of vocabulary and I just took it, those words, I don't really know exactly what they mean, but I'm trying to put them in my lexicon. Yeah. So it's almost the same way that visual vocabulary. So that something gets lost in that translation. Doesn't have any meaning if you're doing it. If I opened a book and I just start like, oh, hey, look at how Rothko did those color swatches, and I do it, it means almost nothing. it doesn't have that same impact and vocabulary that Rothko did. Then I had a friend, we were talking about this, and he had this great argument. He's like, maybe social media is the new art, and that we're more of a hive mind. We're working like ants as opposed to individuals. Well, that's interesting.
That is interesting. Huh. I'll have to think about that one. When you were describing that, the appropriation, that's a huge topic. Like you see certain artists who are doing something that is genuine to them. And then you see artists who take what they're doing and try to mimic it and think that that's a style, and they do it really badly. You know, like, for example, I'm trying to be careful about what I'm saying, but but you see, like now I'm starting, you're seeing, oh, screw it. So you're seeing, like, as an example, who would be a good example? I've seen people who clearly love Alex Konevsky or Ann Gale, or even the one I was seeing a lot for a while, not so much anymore, Malcolm Lipking.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes I don't even know. I'll look, I'm like, wow, is that a new Lipke? And then.
Yeah. And then you see, and then, you know, for a long time, you see artists who are doing that style. And hopefully, like, I guess the way I look at it is, if you respond to another person's work and it makes you see what you're doing differently, and then you incorporate that, that's one thing. But when you are only trying to, when an artist is only trying to paint as well as X artist, like even if it's Rembrandt, then yeah, you're not really saying anything. That's, like, to me, that's the equivalent of being a cover band for the rest of your life.
Yeah. You know what I like about you is, I've noticed this already, is you do the same thing I do, is make a lot of musical analogies. I do that all the time with painting. And that's perfect. You're right. There's cover bands, and then there's the real band.
Yeah. But then the other thing is that then you have people who are using sampling, and they're doing something really unique, and they're saying something different, and they've taken it and run with it and made it their own thing. Like, to me, that's totally okay. You know, like, that is making something new. That's kind of like the musical equivalent of collage, maybe, you know, to bring it back to the other way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that too. And yeah, it's interesting. And that's the other thing, you know, with social media too, is being that I was in art school before social media, because I've had this discussion with friends, you know, they're like, well, that's how you learn. It's like doing master copies. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. But it's that thing with social media, like young kids are growing up with it that don't know any other way. It's like, should you be posting that stuff yet? You know, if you're really into Alex Konevsky and you're doing a bunch of copy, or not even just copy, like incorporating into your work, maybe you should wait a year or 2 years until it digests, and then it's something that's more you. Then start posting those things. That's the interesting thing with social media, is you get exposure, right? Like, I remember when I graduated in 2006, we were still taught, when we had a portfolio class, we were doing film slides. Mm-hmm. And it was only the next year that digital was the explosion. So I didn't get taught anything digital. So when I was in that last semester of school, we still, like, nobody saw any of your work. You made film slides, you sent it to a gallery, and you could only afford to make 1 or 2 packets. So you have to wait 6 months and hopefully get it back.
Right.
It was really an arduous process to get any press or get seen. And now anybody has that.
Yeah, and it's expensive.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I was like, forget this painting thing, man. This is ridiculous. And then luckily social media hit, and it's like, oh, thank God, digital, or thanks science.
Yeah, or even the iPhone, like, changing the way that you like, it's so easy to take photos, and, you know, like, I don't know, like, I remember having to take my work in to get it shot, and they would give me slides back, right? So yeah, same thing, but taking it in to get it shot, and, you know, it's like $30 for every photo. So that painting better be done, right?
Right.
And,
yeah.
And then you're also, by necessity, really curating your work, because if you shoot everything, you're in for a couple grand.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot more editing.
Yeah.
So I think it's also just a responsibility we have to all take on ourselves. Like, I do that too. It's like, I have to, you know, look at what I'm posting. Sometimes you get anxious, like, oh, I want to post this already. And like, hey, is this really something I'd want anyone to see? And it was interesting what I was telling you, is like, I just came from New York, and it was back in like September, October. I had like, well, I guess what I would coin just kind of an existential crisis, where I was like, all this social media, all this, every once in a while it just boils up for me. So I took a break, and I didn't even paint. I didn't paint for 2 months or something like that, and was staying in New York. And so it was interesting. It was like a detox, like a digital detox of sorts. My brain got back into that mode of, because I've had this discussion with a lot of artists too, of like posting, like, or even just getting to work. Like, what's your motivator? Like, is it just to put something online? Is that why you're getting in front of the easel today, to get that little shot of dopamine from, some likes? Or do you really have something that you're working on or want to say, or trying to better yourself or something like that? Like, what is that initiative when you get up? So I took a break from all that, which was really nice.
And what is your thoughts on that, of posting work in progress versus finished work, curating your online presence? How do you tackle that?
I don't know, because that's the funny thing is, I don't think any of us really know, because we're dictated by the platform. For example, Instagram, they just instituted the story. Well, for me, I didn't update for the longest time, so stories is a new thing for me. But it's interesting to see how that changed there was no memo that went out to everybody. But you notice now artists don't post works in progress. That goes in your stories. Now your feed is more of like your website. You post your best stuff, your finished stuff, show announcements, and work in progress and fun stuff goes into your stories. It's kind of the thing of like, why, do I have a plan, or does it dictate me? And with that, I just kind of ran with it, because I'm like, I don't want to post works in progress anyways, so sometimes I'll just do that in stories.
Why do you not want to post works in progress?
For me, this is something that happened to me when I was in New York. I wanted to get back to the personal joy of, it sounds so corny to say joy, but for lack of a better term, of the painting process. Like I miss those, being somebody that knew life before social media and doing art before social media. There was this really cool thing about just being by yourself and listening to music or something and being your own little world and working on something. And I really like that. I guess it comes back to like, what was your fun times in making art? And that was it for me. So there's no right or wrong, but that's just what it was for me. Is like, that process is a very personal thing that I like to work through myself. So every once in a while, post works in progress. But also, that's the ugly stage, man. Why do you want to show that stuff? Sometimes it just, which is nice, though.
Yeah, I'm so, so to be honest, I'm totally on the fence with that. Like so you'll see, like, if anybody who follows me on social media, like, I'll post works in progress for a while, and then all of a sudden I'll just stop, like, and then and that means for me a lot of times that there's like this long period of time, because I take forever to do my paintings. And it's more like, I don't know. So my thought process, for me at least, when I'm posting works in progress, is partly like, I know, like people who collect my work, for example, they're really interested in like the behind the scenes and how a painting is developed and what it looks like, and wow, it really looked like that, and then you pulled this out of it, or things like that. And so part of it is just like, if that's interesting to you, and then great, I don't care. Like, to me, I really don't care. And then there's another part of me that's kind of like, it makes me less precious about my work, like feeling like this is where it is right now. And just like, that's, it's going to go through an ugly stage, or I have no idea when I finish this, it might not look anything like it does right now. And that's just part of the process of painting. And then on the flip side, I do get that sort of like sense of curation, and you only want to put your best work out. And it's, like I said, I'm totally on the fence, but I can see both sides. But then a part of me, like, I kind of like, you can look at it in two ways. Like, some people look at it like you're a magician and you're showing your tricks, and you're totally blowing it for yourself, right? By showing by opening the kimono or showing what's behind the scenes, you're destroying all the mystery that is and should be in art. And then there's another part of, like, and I get that and it makes sense, but then there's another part of me that's kind of like, well, art's messy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it feels kind of like in some ways more honest to do that. But then I go back. So I really don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. And I don't think there is one. It's whatever we're comfortable with, I guess, because I also think about too, is like when I was trying, and still sometimes if I'm trying to figure something out, like I can remember distinctly, like where I went to school at the academy is a very traditional, like kind of rooted in 19th century art. So collectively, the most out there students would get was Alex Konevsky. Phenomenal painter, always been one of my favorites. But every student was hounded, like trying to find new, magazine clippings of like a work in progress or something like that. And then I remember when the websites came out, he did post one. It was just like a slideshow of a piece, and it was like maybe 20 different images of this one piece going through its phases, and that was like gold.
Yeah,
we were obsessed with that. So I understand that side of it too, because that's the demographic is interesting that changed in Instagram. I remember a handful of years ago, it seemed to be more collector based, and then there was a slow switch over to where it was more just artists and artists. And so you get a lot of people asking about your process. So it reminded me of that. Like, oh, I remember being in school and like I would die to see like a half finished Sargent, Somebody would get a book, that had a sketch, like a Chardin sketch. I remember seeing a Chardin sketch and it blew my mind. Like, oh my God, it's like peeling back his skull and seeing in his brain. So yeah, there's a lot of benefit to that. So it's almost like you as an artist almost feel like, because art's not, it's a personal thing, and we're all taking part in this big collective thing. So it's also, we should share information. It's almost like science in that way, share your discoveries and then help each other out.
That's a really interesting way to phrase it too, because it's almost like you do have these different thoughts, and I think that's just people in general. Like some people feel like life is a zero-sum game, and that if you achieve something, that means I don't.
Right.
And then there's other people that it's more like this infinite pool of knowledge and river and whatever. And I think, I don't know, I guess I tend to be on that other side of it. Like I like that analogy of the scientist. That's just like, let's see what everybody's doing. And, like there's tons of stuff that I see and I'm like, ugh, I don't like that. But that's okay, because there's like hundreds or thousands of other people that absolutely love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's natural too, because I don't know about you, but I found like the hard thing painting. I mean, luckily we're mostly introverts, so we don't mind the time alone.
Right.
But sometimes it just drives you nuts. That was another reason why I went to New York. I spent, like I said, I was there 2-3 months. It was so nice to see people. I mean, painting's such a monastic lifestyle. It's just, you're alone for hours upon hours in your studio. So, being in New York is, all I did, it was funny, I would wake up early, and from about 8 a.m. to usually midnight to 1 a.m., I just walked and took photos. I'd walk 15, 20 miles a day. And I was just enjoying being a part of life and people, and I forgot about that aspect of it. So I think it's easy for us to like get like that, like, no, it's me,
Right.
I'm not going to share. I want the prize, you're alone so much. It drives you nuts.
We become like these weird trolls under the bridge where we're just like,
yeah. Yeah, unless you're a plein air painter, they got it right. You're going out with your friends and painting in nature. You're a studio painter.
I go back and forth. That's really funny that you say that, because I remember like when I first started plein air painting, I was painting with this group of people, and they were more like, they were just out to have fun. So every single time they would plan like wine, like basically go out and we'd be painting. And by the end of it, like somebody would bust out a bottle of wine, and then we'd just be sitting on a lawn somewhere talking for an hour and a half, it was awesome.
Yeah, you're talking about painting, so.
Yeah, so, whatever. It was a lot of fun. Very social, very different than when I'm in the studio. This episode is sponsored by Trekell Art Supplies. Trekell has always made it a point to get to know the artists who use their brushes. So I wanted to talk to a few of those artists.
My name is Greg Crayola Simpkins. I'm an artist. I've been working with Trakell for, it feels like 12 years. I forget the exact amount.
Trakell had gone out to see Greg at his studio to learn how he uses his brushes. They were doing a little research and development to kind of improve their line.
A lot of the brushes I was using, I would damage them pretty hard because, I work pretty hard with the acrylics, and then they wouldn't spring back fast. And I noticed that Trakell brushes, they held up longer, and I was like, well, that's really cool.
They ended up developing a relationship, and pretty soon
they're like, would you like your own set of brushes? I was like, oh my gosh, that'd be amazing. It's like a skateboarder getting his own skateboard, right?
I wanted to hear it straight from Greg, Trakell's first pro team member, and we'll talk about what that means in another episode. But what I wanted to know was what makes Trakell so different from other brands of brushes that he's used.
They held their point better. I don't know if it's because when I have gone up there and watched them make the brushes, it's all in-house right there. You just see the care that they hand make each one. So you can just see that they put a lot of love into making their brushes, and it comes out when you're painting.
And don't forget, from now until July 20th, when you use the promo code SavvyGift at checkout, Trakell is going to throw in a free paintbrush for you. So you get to try these out on your own. Trakell's going to throw in a number 6 golden round tack-on brush for you when you use the promo code SavvyGift at checkout. So head on over to Trakell.com, that's Trekell.com, and use promo code SavvyGift. Speaking of studio time, I want to hear about, we'll switch gears from social media and the state of the social world right now and go into your little cave.
Okay.
Can you tell me about your process and describe a little bit about how you start a piece? Where does it begin?
It changes. I used to start with a lot of preliminary work, thumbnail sketches. Like, for me, it's all composition is the main thing from beginning to end. So I would start with thumbnails, like pencil thumbnails, and then black and white, like oil thumbnails, and work the process from start to finish. I don't do as much, especially if it's like crunch time for shows. So it's, I guess, like practice, but I still try to do that as much as possible. I work partly from photos and partly from imagination. So when I start a piece, I usually lay in pencil now. Like, that's changed. I was taught just laying in with paint, drawing with paint. I lay everything in with pencil.
Why did you switch from paint to pencil?
I think part of it, I went through this actually I'm still going through, I think maybe it's a lifelong thing, but when I got out of school, I hesitate to say we're taught to paint the same, but we kind of were, because it's an academic traditional school. And when I got out of school, I realized the art that I was taught to do is not the art that I like. And it was like a year of like just depression. I'm like, wow, did I make the wrong choice? Like, in my heart of hearts, I love Sargent and things like that, but that is in no way what my interests lie in. Like, my interests lied in a lot of abstract artists, or I was influenced by Giger and a lot of lowbrow art at the time. So I went through this period of like, how do I change that? And I thought it was just about changing the imagery or something. But no matter what I painted, because the way I paint, the way I was taught, the strokes, the vocabulary was still the same.
Yeah.
So it would look terrible. You can't paint something like dark painting like Pissarro or something. It just doesn't work. That's not the right vocabulary. And then it kind of just hit on me as I started looking more like abstract artists. It just hit me one day like a ton of bricks, like, oh, process. And you know what else helped is I saw a video on Ann Gale, and that was completely life-changing.
Really?
Yeah, it was this little KQED clip called Egg or something like that. And it was the first time, it was like 3 minutes. Of the 3 minutes, maybe 30 seconds was her actually painting. And I was like, oh my God, she's doing everything I was taught not to do. Like, it's not how you paint. But God, I love her.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I love that, because I think that the Academy of Art has a very similar curriculum to Art Center in the way that they teach you how to paint. So when you were saying, that's why I asked you, why did you switch? Because like, you do come out with this very, like, especially then before the internet, and, like, again, to talk about the internet that's the one thing that's great about it, I guess, is that when you are immersed in a place like that or like Art Center and you're taught a very, very specific way of doing things and you're looking at Sargent and you're, like you're doing the lay-ins and, you're doing your value studies and like everything that you mentioned, I'm like, I remember that class. I remember doing that. Okay. I remember doing like 1,000 of those. And so you're like, you have this very, very specific way of thinking and everybody else around you is taught the same way. And all your teachers are obviously they're teaching you that. So that's all you know. And, when you have that experience of watching that Gale video or like now just seeing stuff on social media and you get like, you never have that feeling that, oh, there's only one way to do this.
Yeah. What's funny is because the director of the academy, who was my teacher, it went to Art Center and he taught at Art Center for a bit. So there is a direct link between the academy and Art Center. Yeah, I can tell in a millisecond if somebody went to the Art Center or the academy. It's like, oh, I know where you went to school. And that's what my portfolio looked like. And it was like, so I say it's like when I watched Ann Gale, like seriously, there was like in her process, there was 5 or 6 things that I was directly taught not to do. But I'm like, I love her painting at the time. I loved her paintings more than anybody's paintings. And it just kind of, and then I had a friend, David Chung Lee, he's an artist in San Francisco. He did some interview and I was watching it and he said something so simple. It's like, there's no mistakes in art. And so it was the combination of those two things. I was like, oh, your vocabulary and what you make is a direct result of your process. So if you change the process, you're going to have a different result. It's so easy. But when you spend 6 years being like, okay, blocking your big shapes, now find your core shadow, it's so hard to break. That's the way your mind works.
Yeah.
After that, it's like brainwashing. So those were some of my simple steps. I was like, well, okay, let me start at the beginning. I was told never to draw in pencil, but it was something that was frowned upon. It was like, you got to be a direct painter. You go in there with this bravado and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do everything in pencil first. See what that does. And then sometimes I leave the pencil underneath. Or even seeing, Uglo was another great one, seeing process, because some of this stuff's so unfinished. He used pencil. He did this. He did so many things the way you're not supposed to do them. So that led to fun, too. It brought experimenting back into art for me. And then that's when I switched over to really just, and still to this day, I mostly look at abstract art. I'm a fan of a lot of realist art, but my heart, what I love is abstract art because a lot of the times the process is part of the visual experience, not just the end result.
That's interesting because there's a lot of abstraction in your work, but I would not describe you as an abstract artist. So I'm curious if that's what you love so much, why don't you paint that way?
Because I'm a fraud.
I knew it. No, I'm just kidding. the fraud police have come and knocked on your door and they've arrested you already.
Yeah. There's a couple of answers to that. I think one is that I think if I live another 20 years and I'm still painting and I'm not blind and, sick from the fumes, that I'll probably be an abstract artist. I think that's where I'm slowly going towards. And I don't want to feel bad going on too many tangents, but there is a reason why, a direct reason. And I saw this documentary. I have a few things like we all do in my life that were life-changing moments. And there was this documentary called How Art Made the World. It was a BBC documentary.
I have not seen that.
And completely changed my view on art and art's purpose and how I wanted to approach art.
Wow.
Yeah, you got to see it. It's amazing. And in short, not trying to make it too long, but it was from a neuroscientist, this guy named V.S. Ramachandran, who is an art lover. And he came forth with this little hypothesis that, in fact, we respond more to, he used the term abstract loosely, incorporating exaggerated artworks. And his first example was the Venus of Willendorf. It's a beautiful little sculpture. And it's, for all intents and purposes, an abstract piece. And so he has all these experiments where he shows how the brain responds to abstract and exaggerated work versus something closer to like a photoreal work of art. And so that's kind of what kept me in that realm. I was like, wow, that's been my motivator actually for making art for the past few years. It's not art itself, but why we respond and how we respond. So I've kind of kept that one foot in realism because it's interesting to me where we let go and where we hold on, like visually as a participator, as the viewer. In the whole series I was doing on portraits was just that, like, what can you exaggerate? What can you distort? What can you leave out and still maintain interest to somebody? And not in a sales way, like, what can I still sell? It's more of like, what is interesting to us, especially with the human face. Like, can I just leave a whole mouth out and then, distort the head and just a little socket of the eye and have, it's like how we've evolved, pareidolia. And then the brain connects and puts the rest of it together on its own. And then in that way, the viewer is actually participating in the artwork. You're completing the rest of it. It's not just all there laid out for you. I don't know if that makes sense. That was a long tangent. Sorry.
It makes total sense. It's like, what's actually amazing is you can, those terrible old yearbook photos that we had from high school or whatever, these black and white photos. And you can, you can take those and reduce those down to the eyes and the nose and the mouth are just these black blobs, but you know who that person is.
Yeah, exactly.
When you think about it, that's kind of crazy. Like, we have the ability to, like, our brains have the ability to say, if I know you and I see a picture that's reduced down to like a half an inch or a quarter of an inch and it's just black and white, not grayscale, I'm going to be able to look at that and go, yeah, that's John.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's key features. And that's what we learned is doing our block-ins, right? Is like, that's how you squint down, look for the simple shapes. Nothing about distorting them or leaving them out. That's such a fascinating thing. And the viewer takes part in the piece of art.
Right. What's the most essential piece of that? What makes that recognizable? And sometimes it's the way a person is standing. Like, I can recognize my husband coming down a ski slope. I know it's like, I can look at like 100 people coming down and I know exactly where he is, even though, like, he's far away.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating. The one thing that really lost me in art, and I guess in art schooling, it wasn't really taught much, is exaggeration. And it's funny how, at least for a lot of us, I did, but things get overlooked. Like Michelangelo, you don't really notice when he's distorting anatomy all too much. You kind of accept it. But in those exaggerations is where he's really saying something, in David's hands. Or how many people like the Libyan Sibyl don't really think about that? That's not a female body. Like, those are a guy's biceps, but you just kind of accept it, And there's political things, of course, why that happened. But he was saying something with all that exaggeration. And that's, I think, where a lot of the communication comes in with realist art, is exaggerating.
Right.
It's not by, copying things as they are. It took me a while to realize, like, that's just so boring. And I got so stuck on that too, is like at school there's that friendly competition with your classmates and stuff. It's like, who can get it right and looking completely real. And in the long run, that's really not the game. It's about exaggerating and distorting. And that's where the message comes in. At least I think so. And that's a lot of what this documentary talked about, like, and how that affected history and whatnot.
Oh, I have to watch that documentary now. And I gotta track down that Ann Gale clip. I haven't seen that.
Oh, so cool.
So what are you working on now? Describe what you're working on. What's going on in your studio this week?
I have a solo show in August in San Francisco. So I'm working on that.
Where's that going to be at?
Hashimoto Contemporary in San Francisco.
Got to plug it, John. Come on.
I know, I'm so bad at it, huh?
And if somebody wanted to see this, John, where would they go in San Francisco?
And I'm excited because it's my second solo with Hashimoto, and I love them so much. Great people. Like, some of my favorite artists are showing there. So it's exciting and nerve-wracking to be doing a second one. But it's all stuff loosely based on this period in New York. And the narrative is kind of like, it's still in the formulation stage. Like, a lot, like the last few years painting, try not to be too heady with the concepts and let them develop. And then once a narrative develops, then kind of just go with that. But it's all turning out to be like this theme of transitioning. But it's all just stuff from New York. And funny enough, it's like I found, in all of New York, it's the most amazing place I've ever been. I found the most interesting things were the subways. I guess I just like people watching. So I spent so much time underground.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, you do too? Okay, good. I'm not crazy.
No. Oh my God. No, you're killing me right now because I just remember, like, my husband hates big cities, and he would go to New York, I'm sure, but like I think that's probably somewhere I would have to go by myself, so I could just sit there on subways because he would just be like, I can't handle this. There's too many people. But I could like sit on the subway and ride all day long and be totally happy.
Yeah, I did that. There was days that's all I did, and like you can hang out at Union Square Station 14. Like you can hang out there all day. It's huge. You see the craziest people. You see bands playing. Then go down, hop in the subway. All these people are compacted in. And I love this idea of this. Everybody's in this transitioning state. It's not your destination yet. We're all like heading somewhere, compacted into this little metal tube going somewhere. And it just there's craziest people in the craziest positions. You couldn't ask for more diversity than like the subway in New York.
Yeah.
So there's a few paintings that are based on that.
So are you abstracting them in the sense that like, are they kind of like portraits, or are you putting them in a situation? Does that question make any sense at all?
Yeah, no, it totally does. Yeah, it totally does. And it's like half and half. A lot of what I'm doing right now, I actually got into collaging quite a bit. And part of it was artists that I saw in New York, but the main motivation is, second to the subway, like something I found fascinating was doorways. In New York, to like, in the alleys of businesses and things like that. They're like little art galleries in and of themselves because of the layering. You see these doors and there's tagging on it, there's stickers, there's wheat paste, some people just directly painting on them, all kinds of different media. I mean, they're like these beautiful mixed media pieces. And then also I did go, I guess I can say it, like, I guess it's not that illegal, but I went into some abandoned subways, like snuck into places and saw like amazing graffiti down there in the subways, like some of the most beautiful works of art and not going to be seen by anybody.
Right.
It's really phenomenal. And that like really inspired me in terms of motivation. But I think what it really inspired by is that language. Like it's like David Kapp. I don't know if you've ever seen his painting.
No. What's the last name again? David what?
Kapp, Kapp.
Okay. No, I haven't seen him.
He did these aerial views of New York streets, and they were some of the coolest things I've ever seen in terms of like a vocabulary, a painting style, really mimicking a situation or an environment. And that was kind of inspiration. So I found like what my interest was these doorways and then these abandoned subway stations and the layering of media. So it's kind of using that as a vocabulary. So I've been doing a lot of collaging, which I've never done before. So they'll take like a subway painting. It's like in the car, they'll be using collages of advertisements, different things that I'd found in New York that I brought back that I'm gluing on to the substrate.
Oh,
paint
fun.
on top of that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's so much fun. And using spray paint, stencils. I made even my own, I think they call it a New York mop. It's what they do the tagging with, use enamel paint.
Oh, really? I don't know. Describe this. What is this? What is this you speak of, John? I'm listening to this so I just have to tell you something, like back to that conversation of breaking the rules and what you were taught in school. You started describing all this and my mind immediately went to, but wait a minute, is that archival?
Yeah, I know. I did. And that's a big question I've been getting. Like people message like, hey man, is that cardboard? That's not archival. And like, I just don't even want to think of that. Like
Lautrec painted on cardboard.
Yeah, exactly. And I want it to, in some ways, to be able, I hope none of collectors hear this, but I want it to be able to deteriorate because that's what my inspiration was, is looking around the city, how, these artworks go up and then they start to deteriorate. Weather takes hold of them. They're not archival. And
right.
I'm really inspired by that graffiti, but I'm not a graffiti artist, so I'm not going to fake it. I just like the vocabulary intent. But what you're asking though, yeah, so the New York mop, the marker, the easiest way you can do it, like a homemade one, is you buy a bottle of shoe polish. You know how they have that little round foam tip?
Uh-huh.
You just take that, you break open the cap, pour out all your shoe polish, buy some enamel paint, pour it in there, put in like a little bolt. So it uses like a shaker, like in spray paint.
Uh-huh.
And it'll mix it up and you're good to go. That's all they do. And you can do like calligraphic lines, all types of stuff. and it gets really thick and it'll drip. I have a few of those. So I have like 5 or 6 different colors that I'm using, and just trying to incorporate that into what I normally paint.
Oh my God, that sounds like so much fun.
It is. And I was listening a while back to one of your podcasts, and I can't remember the artist's name. I'm hating myself for it. But the topic was, he was talking about transitioning and your art not changing your style too soon, because collectors kind of freak out.
Oh, uh-huh.
I love that episode because I talk with a few friends about that a lot. And I've done that a couple times, and it's such an interesting topic to me, and I don't usually pay heed to it. I know you should. And so this is another, I'm kind of changing things up again, maybe a little too fast, but it's because what brought that up for me is because when you're saying it sounds fun, like it's got to remain fun. Otherwise, did you see that? Sorry, I reference a lot of documentaries, but that Gerhard Richter documentary, Painting?
I don't think I have. Oh, you know what? I have it. So I have it saved, but I haven't watched it yet. You're going to have to give me a list of documentaries.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Gerhard Richter is hands down. He's my favorite painter in the world and has been for years. I almost dropped out of school and Gerhard Richter saved my life. And at the end of that documentary, I don't know how old he is now, 70 something. The very end, he's doing this large abstract painting. He's this very serious German guy, right? And he stops at the camera and he goes, "Wow, that was fun." And then it ends. And it hit me again like a ton of bricks. Like, wow, he's trying to keep it fun. Like, that's why we do it. It's fun and it's exploratory and all those different things. So that's what it is for me, is like finding new vocabulary and experimenting is fun.
Yeah.
And I kind of put the career advice by the wayside of like, don't change too soon,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I talked about that with Julian Davis. I feel like there was somebody else that we talked about that too, but I'm pretty sure now it's me doing it, that it was Julian Davis. Cause I remember that, like we were talking about bringing the person, bringing your collectors along with you when you make a change, or that communication of, like showing people. And that's maybe the other part of social media is like, if your collectors are following you, I think, even if they're not like saying, "Hey, I like this," you're not getting the thumbs up every time or whatever. But like sometimes it just blows my mind who's watching. Like out of the blue, I'll get like, "Hey, remember that painting you posted a while ago? Can I see it again?" And then they buy it. And like, I had no idea this person was even following me, Yeah,
it's crazy, huh?
Careful
what you post.
Yeah, it's insane. But like, I think I don't know, maybe that's why posting stuff is, I don't know. You have to be okay with it, I guess, is where it all comes down to. Like you're saying, it's an individual choice, and I think it's who you are as an artist. Like sounds kind of sacrilegious to describe artists this way, but it's kind of like your positioning as an artist. If you are showing yourself as being somebody who's really, experimental like you are, then I don't think there's anything wrong with showing that and being like, "Hey, I'm playing with this new thing and here's what's happening with it and look what I can do. And maybe this painting sucks, but look at that."
Yeah, true. And the other thing is you just have to, I don't think there's anything wrong with it either. It's just, you got to accept, social media is what it is and collectors are what they are. And you just have to understand the ramifications and be okay with them. Because it does happen. I know artists that drastically change and pretty much like hate mail from collectors, or from a social media standpoint, you'll lose a bunch of followers. So what? If this is what you want to do, just understand it. You can't go and do that and then like, why did no one likes me? It's like, well, you built your fan base doing one thing, or your follower base, or your collector base, whatever you want to call it. That's what they're used to. Like, branding happens on its own, whether you want it to or not.
Right.
So when there's change, you're not going to please everybody.
Yeah, but I think maybe I'm too Pollyanna-ish. Yeah, I think you're going to, like, some people are just going to be, I don't really like that. It's kind of like this weird way of putting it, but it's kind of like, to go back to the musical analogy, when when Bob Dylan went to the electric guitar, he pissed off a lot of people, right? But he also picked up a lot of people that really loved it. And then some people were just kind of like, oh my God, I can't believe he did that. And then wait a minute, now that I've taken time to listen to it, I can handle this.
Yeah, great analogy.
Bob Dylan. But I mean, I think to what you're saying, it's like, you can't spend your whole life trying to make these people happy. Like at the end of the day, if you lose a couple thousand followers on whichever platform it is that enough to make you stop doing what you're doing? And that's the other side of that's the bad part about social media, is that if you allow it to become like they are involved in making your art and in that much of a detail that they're telling you what to say by liking or not liking something, I think that's where I have a problem with it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree with you. Yeah, and like you were saying too, that's the other half, is like, in doing that, if you're changing your stuff, realize too that you're going to pick up a new base of people that enjoy that work. So you may some people will lose interest in you, and there'll be a whole new audience that maybe enjoys this, and maybe they like your back catalog, maybe they don't, but they enjoy what you do. And at the end of the day, what's most important, that you enjoy it or that somebody else enjoys it?
Right. Some guy on social media that,
And I like Dylan both electric and acoustic. So, hey.
There you go.
Some people like it both.
Very cool. So your show is opening in August in San Francisco?
Yes. Saturday, August 5th.
Very cool. Good to know. That will be just when I'm going to I'll be in Italy, and I'll be just getting back right around that time.
Oh, cool. Are you going to the JSS?
I am. I've finagled it. I managed to do it again this year. So I'm very excited. Tough call in some ways, but I'm super, super excited to be able to do it. So August 5th, you're having a solo show. Anything else coming up?
Yeah, I'm doing just group shows like later this month. In June, I'm doing the Ben Gallery in Colorado. Does the Palette show by Dina Brodsky, curates that one. And I'm doing one in that. Then the solo. I was trying to cut it down this year so I can focus on the solo show.
Nice. Very cool. Well, John, thank you so much for indulging me, taking the time to talk with me, and going off on tangents with me.
Oh, my pleasure entirely. It was so much fun. I'm really honored to do it.
Thank you again for John for sharing his insights with the Savvy Painter community. You can find show notes for this episode along with examples of John's work, how to connect with him, and links to all of the artists that we mentioned at savvypainter.com. Just click on the podcast link and you will find it there. And while you're there, make sure you don't miss an episode of the podcast. Sign up for show notes, updates, and free guides at savvypainter.com. One more thing I want to let you know. This year, you can expect a lot more workshops from Savvy Painter. If you are an artist who struggles with getting painting time in, or feels like you're always busy but never really moving forward with your art, then my workshops just might interest you. Past workshops include Mindset Mastery, a 5-week online workshop to help you get past the roadblocks that keep you from painting. In it, we tackle the inner critic, fears of artists, and setting yourself up for a successful creative day. The workshop, How to Develop a Relationship with the Right Gallery, helped several artists find the right gallery and show their work. So if this is something that interests you, you can go to savvypainter.com/workshop and get on the email list. This is separate from the main list that tells you when a new episode comes out. This is just for the workshop, so you don't get quite as many emails, but when you do, there's always something really good happening. Sign up now and get a downloadable PDF with case studies that tell you exactly how 3 artists pushed through barriers that were getting in the way of their studio time. You can, for example, learn how Rhonda went from not wanting to call herself an artist to getting her very first solo show. Also, listen to an introverted artist describe how she built her confidence and then spoke in front of an audience of her peers. And you can discover the tools that Samantha used to take back her power after a decade of believing that she had no, I'm putting air quotes there, she had no talent. So again, go to savvypainter.com/workshop to reserve your place on the list. When you sign up, you get that downloadable case studies that I mentioned, but more importantly, you get exclusive invites to upcoming workshops. Most of the time when I launch a new program, it sells out before I ever announce it publicly. So reserve your spot now at savvypainter.com/workshop. Until next week, this is Antrese Wood with the Savvy Painter Podcast. Thank you so much for listening.